Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Citadel, 2nd edition, by Jez Cajiao. Narrated by Wayne Mitchell. Prologue.
"God, I hate this damn forest,"
Thomas grunted, staggering to the left as he slammed into, then bounced off, a broken section of tree that had been hidden behind a low-hanging broken branch. The trail masters were good. They really were. But when they led the way and destroyed the trees in their path with magic, there were always sections of the underbrush left jutting out. "Yeah, well, shit happens," Cran yelled, grabbing Thomas and riding him, making sure he wasn't trampled by the nearly 300 men and women of the Dark Legion advance that were running behind him.
"Seriously, man, what the hell?"
Thomas huffed, rubbing his side. He'd been running with the others, 5 abreast at the front, charged with the responsibility of shoving the remains of the ferns and branches aside. He'd heaved a particularly wide palm frond-like branch out of the way and had slammed straight into an up-jutting chunk of tree. Running at barely below a sprint, he'd had no time to change direction. He'd bounced into Turk, then rebounded off Koran on his opposite side. The entire front had been disrupted as the second file behind him shifted and slowed slightly to avoid hitting them or impaling themselves on the fragment of tree.
"Pay attention, boy!"
Turk shoved Thomas forward again, the massive half-orc's powerful blow making Thomas stagger as he tried to catch himself. "What the hell's going on?" Belladonna shouted, glancing over from the far side of the second file. Thomas bit his cheek in fury at his sergeant catching him fucking up. Worse, this was his first time in the first file, and he'd been determined not to be the one who showed the squad up.
"Thomas!"
Turk's irritated answer promised pain later.
"The half-wit child wasn't watching his path. Oh, damn well was.
Thomas snapped back, only to be shoulder-checked by Koran, who glared at him and shook his head.
"What was that, boy?"
Turk snarled, and Thomas bit down on his response.
"Nothing, sir." "Sir! Sir!"
Turk bellowed, his voice rising in anger at being addressed like an officer, when Belladonna cut him off by calling Turk to her side.
"Oh, thank God,"
Thomas muttered. Turk glared at him, but obediently swapped places along the line, taking up the front right instead of front left position.
"You got off lightly,"
Crane grunted, jumping over a small half-buried log and landing in a puddle of muddy water, Phil spraying in all directions.
"Belladonna doesn't interrupt Turk from me." "Yeah, well, you're a fugly bastard,"
Thomas called back, grinning and swinging his kukri-like blade at the hanging vine before him. At the speed he and the line were running, they couldn't hack down all the obstructing foliage that survived the Trail Master's destructive spells, but each cut weakened the underbrush, ensuring that, by the time another dozen or more had slashed at it, the trail would be clear for those farther back. Each squad of 10 took their turn at the front, as his was doing now, for a 10-minute stretch that had them drenched in sweat and panting by the time they fell back to the rear of the column, allowing the next squad to take their place. Each squad was separated into first and second file, and each took their time in the lead, hacking and slashing, trampling the underbrush down. Occasionally, oh so rarely, they got lucky and crossed a section that had been perfectly cleared already. Most of the time, however, it was a case of frantically stomping, staggering, and trying to damage the obstructing plant life around them without falling and being trampled, as 3 others had so far. Thankfully, none of their squad. By the time the corpses had passed under Thomas's sabatons as far back in the line as he'd been, there was no hope for the 2 men and 1 woman in the crushed armor. He'd swallowed hard, refusing to dwell on the horrible experience of your fellow soldiers trampling you to death rather than slowing down. The Dark Legion advance was charged with creating a new road to the great Tower of Dravith. They were apparently ignoring the original one, despite the easier route, because it would be days longer. If the only costs were paid by the men and women of the Dark Legion...
"Challenges just make us stronger,"
Thomas muttered, glaring at a vine that swung down, its other end burned loose by the trailmaster floating leisurely ahead on a disk of compressed air. Thomas swung his blade, timing it perfectly and hacking through the vine as it flew past, making him grin at a flash from his notifications.
Ding,
he whispered, having been watching for it for days.
It's level 30 in small blights.
He resisted the temptation to open the notification, knowing that there'd be an evolution of his skill, and gods knew he'd been waiting long enough. Any minute, and they'd... A horn sang out from the middle of the column, and Thomas sighed with relief as his file split, peeling off to either side from the lead position and slowing as they dropped back down the ranks to catch their breath. In barely a few minutes, they'd be running at the back of the pack instead, with a nice, smooth, trampled path to follow. The heavily armored force, clad in black, with bronze or gold ornamentation signifying higher ranks, ran past. Thomas grinned inside his closed helm, his labored breath rasping and echoing in his ears. It was intoxicating, this feeling of power, of being one of the greatest forces in the known realms, and that was without the bonuses. As a Dark Legionnaire of Nimon, not only was he now beyond the laws of all others, responsible only to the Dark Church, but he no longer cared about any minor details of life. He was fed, given everything he needed, and more. He was challenged every day to become the best. The camp provided everything to a Dark Legionnaire: training, food, whores, and it was all paid for by the church, so he would never have to worry about anything ever again. All he had to do was run, fight, and kill. Thomas ignored the tiny voice shrieking in the back of his mind that something was wrong, that there was more out there, that he shouldn't be satisfied with just this. However, the wretch who'd survived the dungeon and everything else that had been thrown at him knew better. He had finally found where he was supposed to be all his life, after being dragged this way and that by dreams, wounded and hunted, tortured and abandoned. The only one he'd ever been able to rely on since his childhood, when they'd lost their mother, was his twin, Jack. Since he'd lost him, the world had grown darker and grimmer every day. Friends had stabbed him in the back in this new world. He'd been tortured, beaten, starved, and sleep-deprived. Tommy had lost everything, and through the constant abuse had learned that what a man truly needed was a purpose. Well, he'd found his. Some fucking dickbag had captured the Great Tower, a feat that the Dark Legion had been training and preparing for, apparently. Then he'd claimed overlordship of the continent through some stupid ancient law of imperial right. Then the fucker had raided the city of Hymnal. Yes, it was a shithole, to be fair, and Thomas would have cheered at the thought of that wanker Barabaratus being robbed at any other time. But the cowardly fucktards had used an airship's main cannon, the realm equivalent of a WMD, on the sleeping Dark Legion's camp. Hundreds were killed, possibly thousands injured, and the kind of people who would do something like that needed to be curb-stomped into the next hemisphere. Worst of all, though, the asshat who'd done it had laid claim to his brother's gamer tag, Jack's. He'd actually managed to get the dark god Nimon, the only real god there was, to hate him personally. This asshole made the god of gods sit up and declare him an enemy of the church. Thomas knew he'd never see his brother again, not in reality, not beyond his dreams and wishes. But if there was even the slightest, minuscule chance that Jack would find his way here, Thomas couldn't risk the dark god hating him by proxy because of the things this asshole did. No. Thomas would kill this fucker himself, and he'd expend every effort on making it as fast, yet painful, as possible, so Nimon would forget that name as quickly as he'd become aware of it. Chapter 1.
Jax! Wake up!
Oracle cried. I rolled to my feet, displacing her and searching the room frantically, trying to spot the threat.
Jax!
Oracle shouted again. I spun on her, my mind filled with a mix of fear, aggression, and a need to fight. What? I shouted. Then I felt it. A sensation, a terrible warning, and it emanated from the northeast. I grabbed my naginata and sprinted for the door. Tang threw it open and got out of the way barely a second before I'd have taken it off its hinges. I bolted for the ladder to the upper decks, leaping and triggering my Sword and Majesty ability, and flew out the hatch. I spun in the air, dropping onto the lower deck and staring into the distance. My eyes locked on something that was still beyond the horizon, a structure literally hundreds of miles away. Oracle focused on the feeling, receiving a message from Seneschal even as Janae spoke it to me, her voice grim as it rang in my mind.
Beware, Eternal. The Dark Legion of Nimon has begun to march on the great tower of Dravith. The war of the gods has begun.
Janandra! I bellowed, spinning around. Get us caught up to the fleet, fast! I turned to the others as they raced up on deck behind me, ready for a fight. The Dark Legion is heading for the tower. We need to get there now. I only hoped we wouldn't be too late. What happened? Tang asked. I shook my head, adrenaline making my heart thud. Gesturing for the others to come with me, I strode to the wheelhouse. Grizz hurried to the door and opened it, glancing inside, then leading the way, his Legion training dictating that I should never enter a room first whenever possible. I hurried inside, the clump and clank of the others filling in, causing the room to seem overfilled. Composing myself, I sat on a desk, thinking while I waited for the others to get settled. Okay, everyone, I began when a knock sounded at the door. Selwyn ducked her head inside, earning a grunt and wave from me to come in and close the door. Right, I started again. The shit's hit the fan. The Dark Legion has set off from Hymnal, and they're headed straight for the tower. I don't know how many, how long, or how they're traveling, but Janae managed to give us a warning almost the same time Seneschal sent one. Oracle, what did he have to say?
It was Deason who found out about the Dark Legion.
Oracle took up the narrative as she flew into the middle of the room and slowly turned to face us all.
He saw the trail of destruction and skirted it at a distance before heading at full speed to the tower. We've got a week or so, most likely. Maybe 2, at the very most. That's the best case scenario. Worst case, although it's the least likely, is 4 days, which is only possible if they have a hell of a lot of mages and mana potions. It also depends on the Force's mana, as they're using it to smash a path through the forest. Trail Masters,
Yen grunted, shaking her head in disgust.
The Dark Legion like to boast that they're far faster than the True Legion, and have taken to hunting monsters in the areas around Hymnal. The ones that are worth gold either as alchemy ingredients or bounties, anyway. They use a group of specialist mages to lead the way, destroying everything in their path with magic, while the soldiers follow along behind, and other mages use spells to increase their speed.
Sounds well thought out, I admitted. She nodded.
It's a tactic from the Imperial records, except that there should be a full legion at the front, right behind the mages, to protect the builders who follow behind, laying the roads. We've not had mages in the Legion capable of that for hundreds of years, and no need to make new roads anywhere, so...
She shrugged. Well, it looks like they're using that tactic against us. I frowned, thinking quickly. Oracle, what else can you tell us?
There are several hundred Dark Legionnaires. Deason didn't want to get close enough for an accurate count, but they're going as fast as they can, and they have at least a few wagons behind them. They're making the aggressive time, heading straight for the tower. Seneschal and Hef are changing the tower to a war footing. All indoor repairs are being halted as they work to shore up and seal the tower from the bottom. Deason intends to go back out on patrol as soon as his crew have restocked the ship. Orin is working on the Agamemnon's Wrath, but she's nearly done, and they're going over the plans now.
Good. Tanandra, how fast can you catch us up to the fleet?
I asked. Jan and the diminutive wisp exchanged a long look.
"Lojax,"
Tanandra started, wincing.
"the interesting Endeavor is badly damaged, and the gnomes are all aboard the Falcon. But even if they were here, working around the clock, we couldn't increase our speed by much."
"How long?" I demanded.
"A day to catch up, if we go as fast as we can."
I shook my head. "That's too long. If they're using magic to travel at high speeds, I'll need to return to the tower as fast as possible. How long for the fleet to get from here to the tower?" She grimaced.
"Judging on no more than a 10% increase in speed over their current, and that is dependent on guesswork at this stage."
Tanandra calculated slowly.
50 hours, at a minimum."
"Are you shitting me?" I stared at her. "The worst-case estimate is a few days. That puts us arriving at the same goddamn time. They're on foot, trailblazing through a forest."
"They also have specialized magic to assist them, and we're flying decrepit and half-built ships that are well over 100 miles farther out than they are,"
Oracle said, redirecting my ire from the little wisp and diffusing it. I glared at her as well, then forced myself to take a deep breath, relaxing my shoulders and sitting back upright from where I'd hunched. "You're right," I grudgingly admitted, nodding at Tanandra. "I'm sorry for snapping at you. Right, I need options, people."
"Take Malship."
Lydia suggested, causing Sarahween to glare at her.
"Not permanently. Don't worry."
Lydia patted the air between them reassuringly.
"We change over to the other ship, kick the gnomes back over here, and tell them to fix it as best they can. Then we head back to the fleet at full speed, load up the fastest ships with as many legionnaires as we can, and leave the rest to follow along behind."
"No, that black ship is still out there somewhere." I shook my head gravely. "If they see us all essentially abandoning the fleet, you can bet they'll attack again. We can't take all of them, but we could take maybe 2. Cram as many of the Legion elites onto the 2 fastest ships we have, head straight for the tower, the rest protect the fleet." I mused. "I wonder how far I could get using my flight ability."
"A dozen minutes at best,"
Oracle stated calmly, gesturing at the rest of the room to calm down as they all objected at being left behind. "Damn it," I grunted, and then shrugged. "Fine. I'll get to go tell Mal the good news then, I guess. But he's gonna be pissed."
"Considering the gnomes?"
Sarween said with her grin.
"Yeah, I'm thinking that's likely."
"Shit."
Yeah, shame, boss. It was hilarious at the time. Grizz somehow managed to look mournful. Any chance we could do a swap, you think? Give him this ship and we take his?
"Never," Jan said, gaping in horror at Grizz before turning to me. You wouldn't, right?" he asked. For a second I considered it, just a second, but I shook my head quickly. No, even if it wasn't for the fact that the ship probably has all sorts of cool little weird things in it, knowing the gnomes. It's Tanandra's body now, and as such, she'll always have a home with us.
Point?
Tang leaned forward to interject.
So, just so we know for the future, is she a member of the ship's crew or the captain of this ship? You know, seeing as it's her body?
"Why, thank you for adding just one more feather to my load, Tang," I growled at him and looked back to Tanandra. "Okay, not a good time to bring this up." Tang had the good grace to look embarrassed by his question and its timing. "But you do need a full crew and a captain. They will look after you and maintain your body. The captain's purpose will be to give you advice and to run the crew. You will be equal to the captain until you prove yourself to me, but above all others aboard the ship. We'll figure out a way to integrate the fleet in the Legion soon, I guess." Tanandra gave a small yet elegant curtsy and smiled when she rose, nodding her acceptance. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw happiness in her.
"All my existence, I was a slave, although in a gilded cage, to know that once I prove myself, I will be free in the service of the Empire. Yes, but still free. It is a balm to my soul,
she whispered. You will be, Tanandra. At least as free as any of us truly are, anyway. After all, would you step aside and let some of these scumbags live? I asked, arching one eyebrow. If that wanker back there, the one who was trying to get into the vault, was a member of the noble families like he claimed, you could have just let him have what he wanted, right?
Well, yes, but...
Tanandra said slowly. But you knew he was an asshole, and you weren't going to let him get away with it all? I persisted, and she nodded. Good.
If he'd known the right commands to give, though, I would have been unable to refuse him,
Tanandra added, uncertainty in her voice. And if he was strong enough and we weren't, he'd have been able to take anything he wanted from us. There are always ways that they and we can do things. It's all about choice, I said firmly. You chose not to allow him access once you saw his true nature, and because of that, you're free now. I left her mulling that thought over as I stood and looked around the room. Okay, people, get your gear together. I'll go see Mal and set things in motion over there. Bane, get the alchemy gear, will you? I got a nod from him. Thanks. Everyone else, you got about 10 minutes. Get your gear and be ready. I'll get Mal to prepare to cushion your fall onto his deck, so be ready to jump. Tanandra, you'll need to fly us over their deck as soon as everyone's ready. I'm sorry that we have to leave you already, but I'll get Mal to leave his crew aboard in case you need them. I headed to the door, Oracle and Jan remaining behind with Tanandra while the rest of the group followed me out, splitting up to gather up whatever belongings they had. I climbed up to the upper deck above the wheelhouse and surveyed the burned, broken decking, the warped metal, and the obvious reasons that Rain had been able to get into the wheelhouse. I groaned, remembering the fireball that had started it, then the devastation caused by my own heavy landing.
What are you going to do, then?
Asked a voice from behind. I turned to see that Samhain had followed me. I'm going to go see Mal, explain what's happened, and that I need him. Again. I shrugged. No doubt he'll gloat over it and use the excuse to gouge another concession out of me.
He might, if a deal hasn't already been struck,
Samhain said innocently. A deal? I asked, arching one eyebrow. He won't like that.
Mal likes you, sir.
She smiled.
We all do. We hated the shitty world we lived in. That was why we all banded together in the first place. It's harder to take advantage of a group. Mal just wants what you're selling.
What I'm selling? I frowned in confusion.
You know, the whole Empire thing,
Samhain retorted, waving her hand around.
We want in, but we've been burned before, and that's why he doesn't want to swear. We don't want to be the outsiders forever, but that doesn't mean we're going to give it all up for free, you understand?
She gave me a pointed stare. You want me to make it worth your while? I asked, wanting to make sure I understood.
Yeah, and we want a limited oath, one with a get-out clause, so that if you don't keep to your end of the bargain, we can leave. We keep our ship. Any others that we capture will be offered to you for sale first, but if you don't take them, then we're free to sell them wherever we want.
Right. And what's this going to cost me? I eyed her cautiously.
That's for you and Mal to sort out, she admitted. I'm just giving you a quiet bit of advice. Start the ball rolling, if you will.
And the deal you mentioned, I persisted, for getting me to the fleet and aiding in the assault?
Never mentioned that. I said there might be a deal we could work out to get you to the fleet, sir. One that may be revolved around that fancy alchemy set you have below decks.
Sarwin casually gazed out over the side of the ship at the waves far below, then glanced at Mel on the deck of his ship. Predictably, he was screaming at someone. As I squinted, I was fairly sure it was Gint, actually. "I need the alchemy set," I admitted after a few seconds of silence while we both watched Mal. His face had gone from white to red to blue, and his choice invectives pierced the air in the distance.
Well, we need potions, so maybe we could do a deal on the potion side of things. After all, you did agree to hand over some of the potions you made with our ingredients.
She broke off and squinted hard at the rear of Mal's ship as it drew ahead slightly.
Is that Jay? Is he nailed to the stern?
Yeah, that looks like Jay. And yeah, although it looks like he's just tied to it, I agreed, trying to keep the worry out of my voice as I forced a grin and waved to him. He was evidently secured spread eagle by dozens of small straps to the rear of the ship as well as being gagged.
You know he's scared of heights, right?
Sarwin asked me carefully. I know he's a fucking idiot. That's about all I know about him, actually. I smiled evilly.
Okay, well, he's going to be absolutely useless after that.
Sarwin rubbed the bridge of her nose.
Look, we need potions. You need to get to the fleet quick. We all win if you win. So how about a nice, straightforward deal, and you give me a lift over there before Jay has a heart attack?
Sarwin offered, sighing.
You give us, say, 30 healing, 15 stamina, and 15 mana potions, all average or better in strength, and we call it even?
5 of each of health and stamina, 2 mana, I counted.
20 health, 10 stamina and mana,
she responded. 10 of each.
20 of each, and we provide the ingredients.
What she was asking for was heavily in my favor. Had she asked for those things in normal circumstances, I'd have just given them to her as thanks for all the help they'd given us so far, if I had them. I'll agree in principle. I raised a forestolling hand at her attempt to protest, but you'll have to wait, as I've not got that many potions made up, and you traded me all the ingredients you had already.
Oh, we can get more,
Sarwin said easily. What am I missing here? I wondered aloud.
Let's just say that we know of places to get some herbs. That's all.
She grinned smugly.
We get you to the fleet, then you go with a couple of cruisers straight for the tower. We'll follow along, take a little detour on the way, get a few herbs and whatnot, then we catch up to you at the tower. You make our potions. Maybe you and Mal come to a deal for the future, maybe not. My concern is Mal's company, keeping them all alive, fed and flying. I can give you advice, but you have to make the decisions.
Are you harvesting the herbs yourself? I asked. She shook her head. Fine. How much will they cost you?
That's none of your business, sir,
she said coolly. Fine. I've no time for this. I'll agree to the deal on the condition that whatever price you're paying for the herbs, you buy everything they have from me, and I'll reimburse you when you get to the tower.
Some of those ingredients are expensive,
Sarwin warned me, watching my expression carefully. Over or under a platinum piece for the lot? I asked, pulling one out of the pouch.
Under, at least, it damn well better be.
Sarwin swallowed hard and stared at the coin. Then I expect change. I handed her the coin as Oracle came out of the wheelhouse and flew up to me. Are you ready? I asked Oracle, and she nodded. And you? I turned back to Sarwin, who nodded slowly, still staring at the coin in shock.
Okay, how are we going to...
Sarwin broke off with a grunt as I wrapped my left arm around her shoulders, crouching and lifting her under her knees into a princess carry. Like this, I said, squatting slightly and shoving off hard like a normal jump, but activating soaring majesty at the same time. The result was epic, even as I tried to ignore the pain of the abilities draining my health and mana pools. I flew off the deck, Oracle having to push hard to keep up as I jetted across the few hundred meters of distance that separated the ships in flight. I grinned at the sight of Mal's open-mouthed stare as he watched us flying over so spectacular.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?